you just love when things don't go your way. Plug the thing in, you got your HDMI ready, plug it in the computer, and you think, oh shit, it's gonna be great. Gonna have really good special effects, and the game's gonna hook up nicely. You're gonna be able to capture everything, and it's gonna be sweet. Then you figure out that the thing just will not do anything. The Elgato just will not capture the other console. That's my PlayStation 4 fine, but PlayStation 3, I don't understand that. I hooked everything in, I got it right, and it shows up, it tells me what to do. You know, I need to switch over to this on your PlayStation 3 settings, and I do that. PlayStation 4, I mean, I'm sure I had to go, you know, turn off a couple of things, but what is worth it, captures nicely. The frame rate may not be something it's best at, but I'm trying to work on it. But the problem is that I tried to capture the PlayStation 3, but sadly that ain't happening. So, Earth Defense Force, the Shadow of New Despair. Ooh, don't you just love that? Earth Defense Force 4.1, the Shadow of New Despair. It's got a great subtitle, and this looks epic, really epic. In fact, it is epic. I'm gonna tell you why. First of all, it's an updated version of a game that came out not too long ago, because you see, Earth Defense Force 2025 came out in 2015, if I'm to believe, which the other version, the PC version of the game, which I heard is a better version, came out in 2016. This version came out first in Japan of April 2nd, 2015, then in the US, December 8th, 2015, and then in Europe, February 12th, 2016, and had a worldwide Steam release in July 18th, 2016. So, this is an updated version of this game, and also a remake of the PS2 game, which is just called Global Defense Force, or Global Defense Force 2. The basic plot can basically be summed up as this. There are aliens known as Ravages, giant insects that you can see on the screen, and what you basically have to do is just fight them. That's all you're going to be doing from start to finish. While there is a more intricate story behind them, they get way more eclectic as the game goes on, ranging from bees, spiders, giant spiders, just the works. And after a while, you just started finding flying alien robots and these things called Hectors, which are just giant robots. And in general, the game gets really bizarre and just really crazy. But I think that's what the beauty of EDF, or Defense Force, comes into. It's just sheer pure action. That's all it really is. There are 4 classes, and what I find really interesting is that they rank these classes based on their level of play, the level of skill they assume the player will be at. It shouldn't really be based on the skill of the player, but how they play on the field. The 4 classes are the Ranger, the Wing Diver, and the Air Raider, and last but not least, the Fencer. While the Rangers are the one people can be going to first because he is the most versatile. He's described as flexible and adaptable, basic infantry of the game, basically the foot soldiers of the entire Earth Defense Force lineup. The Wing Divers are fast and agile, but at the same time, they're the weakest class, like literally the weakest class. They'll go down easily on higher difficulties. They're armed with energy weapons and jetpacks. The Air Raider is probably the most fun I have with the game that isn't the Ranger. He's a support class, and I'm the support guy, able to deploy health recoveries and force fields and summon vehicles of their own to aid with combat. And also, they're also able to aim at a designated target and have airstrikes and just all these cool little things. They're the most technical class of the entire game. And then we have the Fencers, the big tank motherfuckers. These guys are armed with jet boosters and an insane exoskeleton. They're able to carry oversized weaponry and this special shield would block all damage. But they're also considered the hardest class to use because they're the slowest class. They're very cumbersome, but at the same time they have the most health. They should be used by, you know, higher tier characters, but at the same time, I think it should be based on how the player can play as his characters, rather than the difficulty of how the game tells them they should be at. Speaking of difficulties, there are about 5. Easy, normal, hard, very hard, and the one I like to call the fuck you. It should be plainly called as fuck you. It's called Inferno, and everything just does more damage. Everything moves way more frantically. You see, difficulty in this game isn't based on, you know, something like, oh well, let's do this way or do this that way. It's more based on how many enemies are dropped into the field, how much health they have, and how insane they can fucking move. Inferno or Very Hard should not be touched unless you are going with someone else. Unless you have a friend beside you, you should really not be touching these modes at all. But, and this is a big but, the recommended modes you should be doing on your first time should be normal and hard. Why? Because the higher the difficulty, the higher the chance of weaponry being dropped. You see, one of the big selling points to me about the game is how it had an insane amount of weaponry in the game. An insane arsenal given to the player. Some of them were special weapons, joke weapons, or some of them were just the typical, you know, sniper rifles, assault rifles. It all depends on the class, for example. Like the aforementioned Air Raider, he gets things like tanks, airstrikes, this thing called a limpet gun, which is basically like shooting C4s at like your enemy, while the Ranger gets a typical assault rifles and stuff like that, and the Fencer gets like special shields, close range weaponry, like an entire tank gun, giant chain guns. And the Wing Diver gets special energy weapon because the way she plays is based on an energy meter in the bottom right of the screen, which means you have to be mindful of how much energy you have at one time, but at the same time, your special weapons, they also use energy. Some weapons do not, or at least some weapons do not do it in a copious amount, but on higher levels of play, like Inferno or Very Hard, if you are, you know, ballsy enough to attempt playing Inferno or Very Hard with any other character that isn't the Ranger, because I believe Rangers have the best loadout in the game. But if you're going to do Wing Diver on a higher difficulty, you gotta be mindful of your meter. Be very wary. If you're on the ground, that's the last place you want to be. Again, the Wing Divers may have versatility, may have agility, but they're weak as hell. The gameplay, as you can see, is your standard first-person shooter affair, but with a twist. You are up in these giant like arena-like places, cityscapes and beaches and industrial areas, and tasked with defeating literally every single enemy in the area. You basically pick a character and you pick a loadout. You pick any tools you need, any tools you might want for the task at hand. But again, not everything is effective for a specific mission. Sometimes you might be dealing with just strictly flying enemies. Sometimes you might be dealing with a pseudo boss enemy, and you might not want to go in with a very weak loadout. You're basically going to get a better bang for your buck. You're going to get better equipment, better strength, and stuff like that. As you can see on the screen, as you defeat enemies, they drop health items, armor, and weapons. What you really want to be picking up is the armor and weapons. The health items are strictly for that set, you know, path of gaming right there. It's just basically, okay, if you're low on health, you can pick it up. I pick it up anyway because I just am a klepto like that. I just pick up everything I see. Sometimes I will ignore it if I don't need it, but 9 times out of 10 I'm going to be picking it up anyway. Again, higher difficulties, you're going to be wanting to do those if you want to get the better weapons. That way you can attempt the higher difficulties if you want to, and even attempt the DLC missions, which actually aren't that bad, but they are hard as hell. One of the absolute best things is how each class interacts with everything else around them, be it the enemies, the environment, and stuff like that. Standardly, if you're going to be playing with a Ranger and you don't have any of your friends tagging along with you, you're probably going to be going on foot the entire thing. Which means you're going to be going slow most of the time. And the reason why I'm dive rolling a lot, as you can see in the video. The reason why is because if you press the analog stick in a specific direction, see, normally you jump. The jump button is usually mapped to the L2 button. But if you press it diagonally, like, okay, say for instance, okay, I want to dive to the left. If you want to dive to the left, you're going to have to push the analog to the left. If you cannot dive or dodge roll in front of you, because then you'll just jump. And you're going to be wanting to do this, because as you can see in higher difficulties, you're going to be dealing with a lot of insane shit. You see all those little bit of insects up there. Of course, I'm probably slaughtered them by now, but they get hacked insanely, like an insane amount. And the Ranger has very little defense of his own. He has a great offense, but little defense of his own. The Wing Divers have better vertical superiority. As they can fly, it means you can be tackling any terrain the game throws at you. Air Raiders are slightly, but only slightly, the same as the Rangers. Only because, yes, they can go on foot, but at the same time, like I said, they can drive vehicles. Tanks, mechas, helicopters, the works. They can pretty much drive vehicles anytime they want, so long as they accumulated the amount of points needed. You see, the game runs on a point system too, and that's way more apparent when you play the Air Raider, as you can't just keep throwing out flares to get yourself a tank every time you destroy one. You have to make sure that at a given time you have enough points to get all these good little things out as backup. Like airstrikes, for example. You can't just throw it out willy-nilly and keep doing it. You have to accumulate points first, which I think, again, that rewards play on the ground, because you can't just have a tank and go around destroying every single thing. It will get destroyed at one point, especially in higher difficulties against enemies that can counter a tank, like flying enemies or stronger enemies that are more armored. In terms of the Fencer, on the other hand, they're the hardest ones to play. I understand that, because they're, again, for harder play, which is the reason why I rarely play it at all. But at the same time, the Fencer rewards a player for being with the team. You see, the Fencer is really dependent, very dependent, on your team being as good as you are. Kind of like any game with a higher level of play, you really need a good team, because a soloing Fencer is utterly a myth. I'm sure there's somebody out there who can do it, but I fail to see who can do it, especially in a higher difficulty where you have very little in terms of backup. You have all the defense you need. After all, you are the Fencer, the strongest class in the entire game. But that won't mean shit if you're getting clobbered 6 ways to hell. And before closing, one little weird thing that I noticed, and the reason why the game as an update is supposed to be better than the 2025 one, which is the original version of this updated version. If you notice, if things are in the foreground, like if something's in a really back of like the level, it would actually drop frames and quality. This is something that a lot of, games do when they want to have multiple things on screen at one time. They just drop the frames of when something is happening. If you notice the soldiers in the game, I really didn't call attention to it because I really didn't stop at one point to kind of observe this. They'll drop frames of animation and their models will degrading quality. This happens to everything, even tanks, enemies, everything. This makes it to where, again, you can have multiple things on the screen at one time. Part of the problem with Earth Defense Force 2025, as I played on the PlayStation 3 and 360, is that they didn't do this on the original version. So everything was on screen, everything was moving, and there's a lot of slowdown, like copious amounts of slowdown. And the last thing you want in the middle of a very heated firefight against fucking giant ants is a lot of slowdown to where you can't aim properly. Hello. I overall had fun with the game, and I feel that everyone should experience it at one way or another. It's a really riveting game. May not be the top notch on everything, may not have the best everything in the world, but it's just a great game overall. And if you want to see more and hear more of my beautiful voice, click on the annotations. It'll take you places to videos that I probably do not like myself. Bye!